Welcome to the next episode of Brandland. I'm your host, Garrett Justice, and today I am joined by Mark Scott, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Apixio. Mark, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Doing good. Thank you for inviting me here today.
It's great to have you on the show today. I mean, first and foremost, how is the weather in beautiful, sunny Southern California there?
It has been unseasonably warm. It feels like an extended summer. To be honest, it was 80 degrees on Halloween during the day. So unseasonably warm, but cool at night, which is great.
Sounds awesome. I mean, those of us in cooler places, I'm here in Salt Lake City. I know that I have some friends in the Midwest there or wishing we had some of that 80-degree weather these days. So
They're getting snow.
that's right. Well, hey, Mark, before we jump into our topic today, why don't you give our listeners a little bit of an overview of your career so far and what Apixio does?
Sure. Thank you. I've been in marketing and communications for over 20 years. I almost forget how long it's been already. I got into marketing from being a policy advisor in government because I loved marketing. I wanted to learn more. I was hungry for it, and I stayed. So I've worked on the agency side, and I've worked in-house as well, largely at large healthcare institutions. Been through two very large global rebrands for two very significant healthcare companies, and kind of took that experience forward and joined a startup almost 6 years ago. And that's Apixio. At Apixio, we like to think we are helping solve a critical healthcare data problem. Every year in the US, they create about 1 billion clinical documents each and every year. 80% of that healthcare data is unstructured. It's hard to get at and largely goes underused in the provision of your healthcare. So we use AI and other statistical techniques to mine that structured and unstructured healthcare data for targeted intelligence to improve healthcare. We have a bunch of different analytical solutions for health plan and other risk-bearing providers or ACOs to learn about patient conditions and population risk, care quality, performance, and those insights then perform those and impact those programs around cost, quality, and experience. Kind of value-based care focused. And then our vision is it's pretty bold, but we're on the path to give organizations across the healthcare spectrum the power to mine clinical information at scale by using our platform and creating novel insights that will change the way healthcare is measured, how we deliver care, and then influence how discoveries are made.
It's awesome. Sounds like an awesome mission and great idea. Very cool company. So tell me a little bit more. How big's your team there?
We're small still. I mean, when I joined Apixio, it'll be 6 years in March. There was 30 people there.
Wow.
We're over 100, into the low hundreds now, over 100 now, and growing, and lots of open positions. If anyone's an engineer, we'll love to talk to you.
Always need those engineers.
Yes, there's shortage everywhere.
That's right.
But it's really dynamic culture. It's one of the strongest values that the company provides, I think, outside of work and being mission driven. We have a really strong and valuable company culture that we've really focused on building and ensuring it survives over the years. So we're pretty happy. It's a group that's collaborative and loves to play and work together. It's really different from other places I've worked.
Cool. That's so awesome. And that size of company is so fun too. You've kind of hit your stride a little bit, what's kind of working but you're not so massive where you can still know most of the people on the team. So very cool.
Yeah. I mean, my team's, seven, seven mighty. And that includes, digital marketing, some Marcom, marketing program, and product marketing. So
nice.
That's kind of the spectrum right now, and growing. We'll continue to grow as the business needs, but our growth's been tremendous. That hyper growth year over year that you hear about is kind of where we've been, awesome. And we'll throw that down again this year. So
Awesome. And primarily based in Southern California, is that right?
Actually, head office for the companies in San Mateo in the Bay
Okay.
Area.
Okay.
I moved back down south. Gosh, it's 3 years now. Time flies. We were expecting our third. We decided to move closer to my wife's family where we used to live. So we moved back down south, and now I do plane and telecommute.
Awesome. Well, good for
Well,
you.
not so much plane these days, but
That's good. Well, Mark, I'm excited to jump into our topic today. With your experience there at Apixio and also, previous experience in your career so far. When we were talking before jumping on here about, what should our topic be today? You kind of pitched this idea of why brand building often fails. And I thought that was a really interesting, fascinating topic that would be fun to dive into today. So with that, let's just jump right in with that question right off the bat. So tell me a little bit more about your thoughts on this topic and why do many brand building initiatives often fail for companies?
oh, thanks. I think there's many reasons. I'll probably touch on call it three. I I think most of them start without a clear understanding of what brand actually is. What you see is a lot of brand activations focusing on what I like to call the easy stuff, the fluff, the icing, if you will. And I'm going to probably take that analogy a little too
Mm-hmm.
far, but they spend time on how they look, the website, cars full of company swag, sales support material, and they back up a truck full of cash to their PR and marketing advertising agency and put the company and products on full blast for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is it's just icing. Tons of empty calories, as my wife would like to say, tastes good, but leaves you with a sugar hangover and the need for a nap. Not great. So, to take the analogy a little further, baking a cake requires several different ingredients. You need to know what kind of cake you're baking in advance, based on who wants what. What does your family enjoy eating? Do they not like strawberry shortcake, etc.? And then those ingredients need to be proportioned right. They need to be mixed in order and then baked at the right temperature for the right length of time. The icing gets put on last for a reason. To build a brand that connects and endures with people, you need to pay attention to the ingredients. You can't spend your time, especially in a growth stage company, going back and forth to the grocery store because you couldn't make a list or understand what you were baking or didn't have the instructions. So the cake keeps failing and you forgot butter. You went back for butter. You went back for eggs. That's wasted time and energy not spent focusing. So you need to pay attention to the ingredients. Well, what does that mean? Well, first, I would say it's customer or user experience. Now, user experience is a great buzzword today,
Mm-hmm.
but this doesn't mean how it looks. User experience with respect to brand building is how you are marketing, how you're selling and servicing your customers. From everything from how you answer the phone and the tone of your emails to how you run meetings and deal with issues with your customers when they arise, even through contracting.
Hmm.
So how you run your business at all touch points is really the user experience. And that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's what your brand experience becomes as they interact with you through these different touch points along their journey with you. They are developing a brand experience, and that brand experience translates into other things downstream. This, I believe, is one of the fundamental places where brand building efforts fall down. They don't pay attention to the user or customer experience along all the touch points. Most often, they're primarily focused on the visual or tactile execution of that experience. And then service or selling experience falls short.
Mm-hmm.
So it's how you look on the website, maybe a little extra on the product design, the packaging. Apple got us there, right? Full blast marketing, and then the customer service, the return policies, the follow up. How if it's and this is really important in B2B now. Customer experience or user experience has been really important in the B2C area forever. Apple revolutionized that, like it or hate it. But that is, and people used to draw a divide between B2C and B2B. That doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
People have the same expectations of the cars they buy and the enterprise software and interactions that they have. They are applying that B2C filter. Everyone's become a better consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's just as important now, if not more, in the B2B space. It's just more complicated.
Yeah.
So, you know, I would say the second reason that brand building initiatives fail is lack of consistency. You know, customer user experience, and then from a brand perspective, executing on a consistent basis requires a lot of rigor and focus. Working
Mm-hmm.
through a global rebrand at a previous company, I adapted this old strategy mantra and put branding in there. It used to be the essence of strategy is sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote the essence of branding is sacrifice, put it on a giant poster board, put it in my office. So every time someone came to nudge me off course, I'd point to the sign and say, is this a sacrifice we want to make? And it was also a good reminder for me to stay on course. But if you don't deliver at every touch point in a consistent manner, you can't build brand trust and credibility of the type that endures. You're not building a memorable, meaningful brand experience that reinforces the why behind what they did. They
Yeah.
took action, they bought something, they interacted with you, um, and
Makes
that's important. Delivering a consistent experience, and you know this, it's hard. It's not easy. It
Mm-hmm.
requires focus and the ability to make sacrifices along the way to keep that focus.
Mm-hmm.
From product naming and company messaging and positioning, if you can consistency deliver, you develop, then reinforce your company's brand promise, which is key. The market will come to understand in tangible ways, I think,
Mm-hmm.
what the promise is and come to expect or trust. They will get that when they interact with you. There's some very good reasons to do this. It helps build trust,
Yeah.
right?
And that's key, so key in brand building is really that foundation of trust. So I want to dive into that idea of consistency and why so many companies struggle with that in a minute a little bit more. But first, I love the analogy that you shared about kind of that cake,
Yeah.
and icing that cake. And I think that so often people focus in earlier stage companies on just let's just bake the cake, right? Forget about the icing. Let's just bake this cake and get this plain cake out there. It's kind of the sales activation type activities that we do in marketing a lot of times, right? And we overlook the icing on the cake that really helps finish it and work together to tie it in. And I love that because I think in really great marketing is the sales activation and the brand building initiatives playing
Yeah.
together. So really, really love that example that you shared there. And, before we dive into, consistency a little bit more and why that's a challenge, I'm curious from your perspective, based on these experiences you've had in the past, you talked about why some of these brand building initiatives often fail. What's the biggest brand building mistake you've ever made and what you learned from it?
Okay, which one? Um, I have two memorable ones for you.
Okay.
The first one, which I took a big learning from, was I was at a company that purchased 72 companies over 11 years, never integrated a single one.
Wow.
We were operating 86 websites in 36 or 38 countries in 13 or 14 languages. We had
Wow.
13,300 odd SKUs globally. I mean, it was crazy, and we were doing a rebrand to collapse everything into a single company. And as I had traveled, and I was in Switzerland and the UK for a bit, working on this and reaching out to other cohorts in these other companies we had purchased, because we tried to identify brand champions and it just
Mm-hmm.
didn't work. There was a lot of pushback. I mean, I'd go work out in the middle of the afternoon in the company gym at the location I was based out of, primarily in San Diego, and I would get like side eye, people upset because they knew it was coming. Why are you taking down our company? And We love our company. We built it for 12 years. And it occurred to me that we were pushing so hard to build that the brand attribute, the personality attributes, the messaging, the positioning that resonated, that we needed to take a step back and make sure that we were connecting with our employees, because
Hmm.
the internal brand champions were as more or more important than the external ones.
Mm-hmm.
And if we didn't focus internally to build that brand awareness and the value, how in the heck are they going to deliver on our brand promise that we were trying to push through all the customer touch points? Like, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So I created a global kind of competition where everyone across the globe, we knew we were going to fly in at least 30 or 40 people from the different offices across the globe. And they submitted what they thought those personality attributes, the new ones, meant to them, what brand meant to them, why the change was important, etc. And we picked some, we flew them all in, and they were the faces of our brand activation campaign.
Yeah.
Like their wives, in some cases, their children, some of our new products, our annual report, the videos, the website. And they had a great experience. We had a bunch of activities when they were there. So when they flew back home to Spain, to Italy, to Japan, to Australia, to India, they brought back with them a positive experience with corporate,
Mm-hmm.
with why we were making that change. And that was really, really important. And it was a good lesson to me and a reminder that the internal brand champions were more important in many ways, because they have to deliver that promise. They need to understand the value.
Yeah.
Even today, through new hire orientation that we do with our new employees, one of the big things I reinforce is brand and why it's important. A little brand education. So that's one of the things I learned. And then the funny one,
I love that. I love that example. I think that one of the most underutilized marketing channels that we often tap into as marketers is internal marketing there. And especially when it comes to brand building, we focus so much on that customer experience, which is needed in today, right? We want to focus on that customers, but we forget about those employees internally. And that, I think that's one of those reasons why people fail. So love that experience. I want to hear the second one. What's number two?
number two was always check with finance. It was the previous company. We were spinning out a portion, the technology portion of this very large company. And because we were public already, everything was done sequestered. So the brand identity development, messaging, positioning, like literally locked in a room for like 3 months, and paper on the windows, like the works. And I was really pushing hard on a cleaned up and refined nomenclature related to our brand strategy. We were pushing a master brand with some family brands that were well established in the market. And I was forcing some product name changes and pitched it. People bought in, they supported it. And then um, one of the heads of finance came running into my office one day when we're very close to completing all of this stuff and going public with it. He said, "You can't change the name of that product." And I'm like, "Why?" "It's going to cost us $140 million. I'm like, "What?" It was some obnoxious amount of money. It might have been 140 or 114, but we were accruing um, literally value
Mm-hmm.
on our sheet for that acquired company's products as brand equity. Didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I always look for that now, but that was close. And thankfully he caught it. So it kind of saved my bacon, and because we would have had to take that as a loss at some point. So
Wow.
that
That's a real
was really
tangible
important.
example of the value of brand there too. So
Yeah.
awesome. All right. So just to summarize what we talked about a little bit so far. So why do brand building initiatives fail? We talked a little bit about the cake analogy and kind of no substance. It's all about the frosting, right? It's just all about the visual identity and not necessarily the customer experience. You shared these examples about making sure employees are bought in. You have those internal brand champions and you're spending enough time on internal marketing there. finance and making sure you understand the impacts of financial impacts of, potentially changing your brand or building your brand in certain ways. And then you mentioned consistency earlier on and shared some examples. And I want to get back to that. So why do so many, especially growth or early stage startup companies, struggle to maintain brand consistency? Why do you feel like that's one of the most challenging parts of brand management, especially with those types of companies?
Yeah. Well, one, I don't think an experienced marketer is always the first on the list to be hired. Right? I mean, Apixio made an investment and a discerted effort, concerted effort to do that, not in the very early days of the company, but early enough, which I thought was interesting. But startup or growth stage companies struggle with consistency so much because they're often chasing revenue or market first, customer experience second.
Hmm.
I mean, to be fair,
Yeah.
sacrifices are made along the way for like short-term gain, and a truckload of brand debt is created. We always talk about tech debt in these technology companies, but you can create brand and marketing debt as
Hmm.
well that you'll need to unpack and resolve at some point. It doesn't go away if you want to become an ongoing and meaningful company. I think for a company finding their way, however, it can sometimes feel like a rudderless ship.
Hmm.
And anyone who's in this similar space of a startup or a very early stage company, um, it pivoting from one idea to the next, changing messaging and positioning to meet the audience or idea of the day, reacting. This is the big one: reacting to competitive or market perceived pressures by simply just inconsistently changing stuff. Oh well, they're talking and referencing their platform in this way. We should do that,
Mm-hmm.
or we're going to call it this, so we're differentiated. That's not focus. That's not consistent. It doesn't mean that you don't nudge your strategy along the way. You need to. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it should be living and breathing and reactive to, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but to what's going on in the market, your competitive behavior, your where you're going from a vision perspective and the value you bring. Yes, yes, yes. But it's much easier to build a brand than it is to rebuild a brand.
Mm-hmm.
But companies at this stage do not often invest in brand until debt is so overwhelming they're being crushed by it. And it's really hard when you're struggling to find market fit or new market fit or pressure to grow ahead of your skis. You're leaning too far over the tip of your skis. You don't have the ability to focus long enough on, well, how does this really affect meaningfully my connection with the market and
Yeah.
my customers? Is this a sacrifice I'm willing to make because this revenue need we're only going to go off course this much, so we can pull it back, and we're still going to be on course to hit our vision.
Yeah.
That's huge with
Yeah.
companies in this stage, and I think it's just lack of experience. Very often founders, first time founders, become first time CEOs, become first time, I just got VC funded. There's a lot of firsts, and
Mm-hmm.
you tend to attract people from the same area.
Mm-hmm.
Startups for a long time in the Valley were allergic to anyone that came from a scaled company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we only worked at big companies. We don't want you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we need someone who really understands the grind at a startup. It's like, well, okay, you can't grow up as a company or understand what scale means unless you have people that have scale.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I think it's legitimate to say, okay, do they just want to sit behind a big desk and do order taking and that sort of thing? Or are they going to roll up their sleeves and really wear multiple hats and achieve? Sure, that's a hiring decision, not a unilateral, we just need people like us
Mm-hmm.
in this company.
Yeah, really good point. I think you're absolutely right. Hit the nail on the head with that. And my thoughts actually kind of go back to the point you talked about, employees and getting employees bought into building a brand. So often, especially when you're a marketing leader in an early stage startup, um, sometimes it comes down to getting other leadership bought into why do we need to build brand and focus on that. And again, going back to that idea of you have these sales activation activities and then you have these brand building activities. The ideal scenario is that they support and reinforce one another. When you can build a strong brand, it creates additional value and loyalty and the ability to sell more and retain people longer and sell for a higher cost, right? So you're not just competing on just those sales activation activities. And so that's the vision, I think, that as marketing leaders and creatives, that sometimes in the early stage companies, we have to do some internal selling to additional leadership in addition to the employees so that they can start to understand that vision and are on board for investing in it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's definitely challenging, and you hit the nail on the head. It's it's not just you know pushing information down and across; it's up as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is definitely a challenge. I've been there. In what I think as you mature in your career, you realize, you know, not everyone's going to get it or understand it. But if you're in an organization, very fortunate again at Apixio, that people are valued for their opinions, people are actively counseled. It is very collaborative, so there are open ears for that. But I've certainly worked in organizations where, you know, you just got the Heisman for any sort of change or addition to strategy that you wanted to make to kind of hold the road. It wasn't going to happen. So, no, great point.
Yeah, it's awesome. All right. So just summing this up again, we talked again about some of these brand building initiatives, why they fail. And so again, no substance. We talked about that cake analogy, which I love, is it's all icing, no cake, right? A lot of times when we start out, not getting employees bought in, you kind of shared some examples and stories about getting those internal brand stakeholders, as well as not just out and down, but also up, like we just talked about. Making sure finance and others are included in that, and you understand the financial impacts of building brand or changing brand, rebrand. And then we talked about consistency and why that can be such a challenge. So we talked about a lot of these reasons why brand building often fails. But to shift gears a little bit, I'm curious your thoughts then as we kind of sum up what we talked about today. What are the key components in building an effective brand strategy? We talked about these failures, but what are those things that we should be focusing on in order to do this brand building stuff successfully?
Yeah, hiring people with experience and not being afraid to hire people with scale or have come from that is you can't be afraid of that. There's value that they will bring in terms of understanding what it means to focus, the rigor that it requires, if you're truly bought into it. You don't need that at day one, but you need market fit. And then the other things I would probably hit on at a high level: understand who you are. You can't employ a strategy unless you understand who you are. And what do I mean by that is, like, what are you actually selling? And that sounds like a silly statement to make, but not only what are you selling, but what is the market you're selling into? How is it actually being used? What is the perceived value by your users and choosers, your different persona groups, that you're bringing them with this product? Is there true market fit? It seems like a very simple thing, but far too many companies fall down on understanding the simple why behind the purchase. And your different personas have different whys. Mm-hmm. And that goes directly to value and being able to message and position appropriately. You need that input in order to effectively message and position your product and your company. Second, I would say along the same lines, in understanding who you are, understand who your competitors are. There's always a competitor. Greenfield product still has a competitor because there's a way it's being done today. That's your competitor. Yeah. What are they saying and how are they delivering on what they are saying? You need to understand that. Is there obvious white space that you can occupy? How are they being perceived in the marketplace? Those all go to the brand attributes that you want to incorporate in how you go to market and what you reinforce along your customer touch points through that customer experience, reinforcing that consistency. Along with that, I would say there's three more maybe. Understanding your weaknesses.
Hmm.
Um, where, if you are further along as a company, where do you have gaps in delivering that experience? Being honest about it, identifying your weaknesses, and then getting a plan together to tackle them. Um, in a scaled or established company, that doesn't, even if they're successful, doesn't mean they have a meaningful, enduring brand that resonates in a really positive way. It might mean that they just have the cheapest and best product in the space right now for today, but maybe not tomorrow. So understanding where you have gaps, where can you deliver better across that buyer journey, and what problems are you trying to solve? I think those are all great questions to ask when you're looking at your weaknesses. KPIs.
Hmm.
Now, like KPIs, as you know, have changed for marketers like dramatically over the last 15 years. When I started, the KPIs were how many people drove by that billboard, what were the perceived impressions of, blah, 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 and a bunch of PR fluff that
Hmm.
we had to go on, that we tried to make actionable. Now, through digital marketing and marketing automation platforms and our CRMs, we have a lot broader and deeper access to meaningful data, even through our social channels and web interactions, et cetera. So KPIs are important. You don't need to overcook them. I think too many people do. But you want to know if you're brand building or brand killing in your activities. And you won't know that if you aren't measuring it. So establishing key performance indicators, I believe, is key to understanding how you are doing and shining a light on where you might need to course correct.
Yeah.
These aren't dramatic grabs of the wheel swinging. These are, oh, wow, that campaign didn't seem to do well, or our engagement rates are dwindling. We need to dig in to find out why. What has changed? Has something changed in the market? Do we need to adjust or reinforce our brand messages or our corporate marketing
Hmm.
initiatives? Do we need to ramp up corporate marketing, been too focused on product? You're going to look at those different mixes based on what the KPIs are telling you. And they're simple. Some people I have colleagues that just look at engagement rates through their various vertical interactions. It's fine. That's great. But you got to be looking at something.
Yeah.
And then last, again, feels like table stakes. You have to have a clear, reasonable, and practical idea of what you want your company to become and the impact you want to have. Creating a healthier world and curing it of cancer tomorrow is not practical or reasonable.
Hmm.
It's a laudable goal, yes, but people buy in to not only the experience, they buy into and want to be on a journey with you towards your vision. They
Hmm.
want it well understood, and so do employees. I mean, employee survey after employee survey after employee survey in every company I've been in, I either don't understand what the vision is or I want to understand how my work connects better to what I'm doing. That is a reinforcing mechanism for why they're there, their efforts, the mission that they're on with you, and the brand. And clearly articulating that, reinforcing it, and making sure it resonates with your customers and employees in a realistic and practical level is important. It has to be attainable, not now, maybe not in 3 years, but in 5 years. You're making progress towards that goal. And an employee can, or a customer can say, well, why are you selling that? How does that connect to your vision? Well,
Yeah.
this is the next step in our leg to do that. It goes to credibility and directly to trust,
Trust. Yep.
which is two of the other key elements um,
Awesome.
besides consistency.
I love that. I love those tips. I think, what you talked about first in making sure you understand who you are as a company, really that comes down to strategy a lot of times, right? And companies that are a little bit bigger, a little bit further along might have that a little bit more solidified. Earlier stage companies, you might have to get the right people in the room and kind of nail some of this stuff down to understand who are we, what are we doing, right? And then that ties into the vision piece, which you talked about, tip number 3 along the way of who
Yep.
are we today? What do we want to become? And then making sure you can have the right KPIs and measure progress along the way. So
Yeah,
love those tips.
That's a great point, actually. An addition that you made. It's in the understanding who you are, strategy doesn't have to be complicated.
Hmm.
I think we tend to make it complicated, but it needs to be a guiding light for decisions.
Hmm.
So your brand road and your strategy road, they don't need to be on the same path, but they need to be at least parallel,
Yeah.
and they need to be like lenses by which you help make it, it helps make you decisions on, should we build that product or this product? Well, does it align with where we're going in terms of vision and strategy? If not, do we need to adapt it because we just found gold through our customer on an unmet need?
Hmm.
Okay, but that needs to be discussed in a larger context of where you want the company to go and where you are today. And you
Hmm.
need to draw a clear line to that path.
And it ties back into some of the reasons why brand building often fails that we talked about, of not having employees and leadership fully bought into that, right? So it kind of starts at the top and needs to resonate all the way through. So,
Yep.
Mark, this has been awesome. I've loved this conversation we've had today, shared some awesome tips and stories and examples. So thank you for sharing your insight with us today. If there are listeners who have additional questions on this topic or want to follow up with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Mark Anthony Scott. There's so many Mark Scotts in the world. Or you can hit, Apixio website, go to the executive team and find the link there. But I'm on LinkedIn, Apixio and Mark Scott, and you'll find me. I'm happy to connect. And
Awesome.
thank you. This has been a lot of fun. Really
Yeah. And
appreciate
Mark,
it.
again, really appreciate you taking the time today. This has been so awesome. Thanks for sharing your insights and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You as well.
All right. Talk to you later.